Hi, this is Stu Turgel, your host for The Phoenix File, a weekly news magazine and community conversation with the people and programs making a positive impact on the quality of life in our community. On tonight's edition of The Phoenix File, I'll be talking with Angela Hughey, president and co-founder of One Community. She'll discuss her member-based coalition of socially responsible businesses, organizations, and individuals who support diversity, inclusion, and equality for all Arizonans. One Community prides itself on its diverse and inclusive programs, the opportunities they create, and the business-to-business, business-to-consumer, and community engagement opportunities for the LGBTQ and allied communities to come together. Diversity, inclusion, and equality in the local business community. That's our topic for tonight's conversation on The Phoenix File, coming up next right here on Radio Phoenix, where the Valley comes to talk, sing, connect. Good evening, I'm Stu Turgel, your host of The Phoenix File, a weekly news magazine that features the people and programs making a positive difference on the quality of life in the Valley of the Sun. You know, it may be hard to believe, but Arizona's current non-discrimination laws do not include sexual orientation and gender identity. And that means it's still not illegal to fire someone, deny them housing, or refuse them service simply for who they are or who they love. Tonight, we'll be talking about the important work of raising awareness about the lack of equal protections, educating about the importance of these protections, and building a coalition of support for equal protections through the Unity Pledge, the largest equality pledge in the nation. My guest tonight is Angela Hughey, the co-founder and president of One Community. Founded in 2008, One Community is a member-based coalition of socially responsible businesses, organizations, and individuals who support diversity, inclusion, and equality for all Arizonans. Angela's rich background in media has helped her succeed in uniting the LGBTQ community through events designed to engage our diverse LGBTQ and allied communities on a business and consumer level. In 2013, the One Community team launched the Unity Pledge, a concerted effort by Arizona businesses and individuals to advance workplace equality and equal treatment in housing and public accommodations for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals and their allies. Over 2,000 business organizations representing more than 500,000 employees have taken the Unity Pledge at www.openaz.com. I'm proud to say that the Radio Phoenix and our parent, the Arizona Community Media Foundation, are among the thousands of organizations that have signed the Unity Pledge. Angela Hughey is a 2012 graduate of Valley Leadership. She's won awards for her work as an independent filmmaker and was honored with the YMCA's 2013 Tribute to Leadership Award for Public Service. Angela has received the HRC Individual Equality Award and was inducted into Echo Magazine's Hall of Fame. Angela is a 2012 Business Journal Diversity Champion, and she sits on the President's Advisory Council for Phoenix College. One Community is the recipient of the 2012 Phoenix Pride Howard and Patricia Fleischman Community Spirit Award. Angela is a 2013 inductee into the Phoenix College Alumni Hall of Fame. She and One Community led the Open for Business to Everyone coalition in the first quarter of 2014, and that was in response to Senate Bill 1062, which led to an educational campaign of the same name, which focuses on diversity, inclusion, and equality for all Arizonans to ensure the economic stability of the state. Echo Magazine named Angela their 2014 Woman of the Year, and Angela received the Albert Brooks Community Leadership Award from the Anti-Defamation League in 2016. Angela Hughey, thanks for being here tonight, and welcome to the Phoenix File.
Thank you, Stu. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Angela, tell us how One Community was conceived. Was there a precipitating moment or event that got the ball rolling? You know, every movement has a story, so why don't you tell us yours?
Sure, absolutely. So yes, there was a tipping point. Pleasure of working within our local Hispanic community, and I had some of my Hispanic community relations peers go through title changes. They all became multicultural, and so I asked them if they had opportunities to invest in the gay community, and at that time they all said yes. And I said, what are you doing with this opportunity to invest? And they said, not much. And of course I asked why, and what we really realized was that there was an education gap. So businesses and organizations of all shapes and sizes were interested in creating authentic relationships with our LGBTQ community, but they needed to be educated on who we were and how diverse a population we are, and I think really the right way to have an authentic relationship. And so we saw an opportunity. My wife and I sat down at our dining room table for about a year and started scratching out a business plan based on the little bit of research that we could find. One piece of research I think really tipped us to come to market the way we did, and that was we found a piece of research that said once you knew us, regardless of your political or religious beliefs, your propensity to vote against us on things that mattered to us, like treating people fairly, plummeted, because as I like to say, we're just as boring as everyone else.
Why is it that Arizona's current non-discrimination laws are not inclusive of sexual orientation and gender identity? What are the reasons given to continue to maintain such discriminatory practices, and what are the roadblocks and walls that need to be moved?
You know, I have to say that overwhelmingly, I think the answer, which is a big tent answer, is education. In a lack of education, we at one community like to say that we're mythbusters. There was a poll that was done, I think 3 years ago, that said that 72% of Arizonans mistakenly believed that we were already inclusive in our non-discrimination policies statewide. So that's one of the reasons we created the Unity Pledges. We saw an opportunity to educate and empower and engage companies and organizations and everyday Arizonans on the fact that unfortunately we're not LGBTQ inclusive in our statewide non-discrimination policies, but we should be. It's the right thing to do, and it's also really good from an economic sustainability standpoint.
Well, we're going to get into those economic rationales in just a moment. What plans do you have to modify the state's discrimination laws to include the prohibition to discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity?
Well, right now we're in an educational phase, right? So through our One Community Foundation, we have really a four-pronged approach. We're continuing to educate the business community on why we should be, on why employment inclusivity is good business, and why the state should be LGBT inclusive with its non-discrimination policies statewide. We're educating in the transgender and millennial communities, and we're educating our faith leaders as well through our Open for Worship to Everyone campaign. So we know that we need to create an opportunity for every Arizonan that wants to participate in this important conversation about treating all Arizonans fairly. We have to create an entryway for everyone.
Tell me a little more about the work you're doing in the faith community.
Sure. We'll have a big announcement faith-wise coming up here. We're about 2 weeks away, but we're currently working with over 225 faith leaders around the state on our Open for Worship to Everyone campaign. It's an educational campaign where we educate faith leaders on why it's important to be LGBTQ inclusive, put them through training so that they can have these important conversations with their congregants, and then also speak out as spokespeople on our behalf as well.
When you talk about why it's important for them to be welcoming to the LGBTQ community, what are the top one or two things that you tell faith leaders?
Well, I think the big thing is we're all God's children, right? We should want to treat everyone fairly, right? And follow the golden rule. These are simple ideas that are inclusive, and I think make us better people and better representatives in our state. So these are good conversations that we're having around the state right now.
Well, let's talk about some of the practical implications of our lack of laws that are non-discriminatory and inclusive. There are a few areas that one community focuses on. The first is tourism. Tell us how a lack of inclusive laws impacts tourism in our state, which is a pretty important part of our overall Arizona economy.
So tourism's our number one export, right? So we are one of literally a handful regions that are known for the big game, and currently we're at an economic and competitive disadvantage. When we look at the NCAA Final Four, that fantastic 5 days when the NCAA Final Four tournament was going on here, I think that the tournament, I believe the Economic Development Report said it garnered about $325 million.
Not small change.
Yeah, to Arizona's bottom line. But the NCAA came out with a new questionnaire. Currently, we say no on a lot of these questions, right? So question 1 is what region or regions are hosting the festivities in the big game? And typically, our answer is going to be Phoenix, Scottsdale, and then Glendale is where the game's played, right? So question 2 is do the regions treat all people fairly? And so right now, we can say Phoenix is a yes, Scottsdale's a no, Glendale's a no. I believe the third question is about public restroom and public accommodation use and whether or not people are allowed to use the restroom that they identify with based on their gender identity. Here's another example where the city of Phoenix says yes, Scottsdale says no, and Glendale says no. So these games are tough to get. They're great for Arizona's brand and economy, and we have a responsibility to do everything we can to say yes, these initial questions. Right?
So when we say no on the questionnaires, that actually factors into the decisions these sports organizations make in deciding whether to have their tournaments or their games here?
Well, certainly. If you saw what happened in North Carolina with HB2, which was kind of a SB 1062 on steroids and had a Papers, Please piece for transgender North Carolinians. It was just a really, really horrible bill. What you saw happen was the All-Star game was pulled. You saw the NCAA pull tournaments. You saw businesses like PayPal that were expanding their North Carolina pool. You saw concerts and conventions of all shapes and sizes pool. So we have a responsibility. We rely heavily on tourism to make sure that we're always putting our best foot forward. Arizona is a great state. We should be a state that is truly welcoming and open for business to everyone.
That's as far as sports goes.
Sure.
And when we look at other aspects or elements of tourism, how does it play out there?
Well, you have to take a look at convention business too, right? So convention business is a big deal for us. The city of Scottsdale 2 Novembers ago unfortunately lost 2,000 room nights. It was a piece of business that was awarded, and then as the story goes, when the organization went to sign the contract, they had a board member that said, we're not going to Scottsdale or Arizona until they treat the LGBTQ community fairly and equitably like they treat everyone else. So these are instances that we know about. Sometimes, when you dig a little deeper and you talk to tourism experts, they'll tell you that in many cases, unfortunately, we're just not getting the opportunity for the request for proposal. And we, again, want to put our best foot forward. It's a great state, and we want to be open and welcoming to everyone.
We sure do. I want to remind our listeners that one way that they can support Radio Phoenix is by becoming one of our sustaining members. For as little as $35 per year, members receive discounts, savings, and other benefits provided by our membership program partners. And don't forget, the membership fee is tax deductible. For more information or to sign up, call 480-829-5746 or go online to radiophoenix.org and click on the Donate tab at the top. We thank you for your generous support of community radio. Well, we're going to take a short break, and then when we come back after some messages, more of my conversation with Angela Hughey of One Community. You're listening to The Phoenix File. I'm Stu Turgel, and this is Radio Phoenix. Welcome back to the Phoenix File. I'm your host, Stu Turgel, with my guest Angela Hughey, and now more of our conversation about One Community. Angela, before we took our break, we were talking about all of the different challenges that the current laws, or lack of positive laws, challenge us as a state and what the impact is. And clearly one big one has to do with the state's overall reputation. So what are your worries when it comes to our reputation?
Well, unfortunately, in our history, we've done some things that have demonstrated that we at times can be a state that chooses to discriminate. We're very fortunate that in February of 2014, then Governor Brewer chose to veto SB 1062. A year later, a similar law, of course, was passed in the state of Arizona, or I'm sorry, in the state of Indiana, and then repealed really quickly within like 2 weeks because it was so damaging and the business community came out against it. And then of course you have North Carolina and what they did with HB2, which there are estimates that say that the state was lost well over $1 billion worth of booked business because they chose to discriminate. So, you know, we at our core should want to treat everyone with human dignity and value every Arizonan, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity. It's the right thing to do, but it's also important for the sustainability of our state.
Lastly, one community is concerned that the lack of non-discrimination laws when it comes to sexual orientation and gender identity has perhaps and will continue to have a negative impact on the ability to attract and retain top businesses and top talent for those businesses. Speak to us a little bit about this, and if possible, can you share some examples of how this has played out in our state?
Sure. I love to tell the story about Northern Trust. The Greater Phoenix Economic Council called one community, I think this was about 2 years ago now, and they've been having a conversation with Northern Trust about expanding into the Valley of the Sun. And the company had concerns about equal treatment. You know, they were fully inclusive organizationally and thought that wherever their employees lived and played should have the same rights and protections, right? As the story goes, we came in with so many of our community partners and said, you know, we're not there yet, but we're moving in the right direction. We've got 5 municipalities in the state of Arizona that have updated their non-discrimination ordinances to include sexual orientation and gender identity. And to make a long story short, when Northern Trust decided to expand into the Valley of the Sun, they chose the city of Tempe. One of those reasons is because Tempe values everyone and treats everyone fairly and has an LGBT inclusive ordinance. So that's a $95 million deal. I call that 95 million reasons to do the right thing.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the Unity Pledge. This seems like a very positive step that has been undertaken by one community. So tell us what the Unity Pledge is, what does it say, and how do people and businesses express their support for full equality and inclusion when it comes to sexual orientation and gender identity?
Sure. We love to talk about the pledge. So we launched the pledge in February of 2013. It's a public proclamation that says, again, if we want to attract the best and brightest, if we want to put our best foot forward and be a state that's sustainable, we should update our non-discrimination statewide policies to include sexual orientation and gender identity. And that it's the right thing to do because we should treat all people fairly, and it's also, again, good business and good for the business of Arizona. So we've had more than 2,300 businesses and organizations take the pledge. It literally takes 1 minute, and more than 11,000 everyday Arizonans take the pledge, which is simple to do at openaz.com, rather. So openaz.com. And when businesses and organizations take it, you know, many times there'll be a Facebook post or a public proclamation that'll come out. Depending on who the business is, we might have a big, you know, Unity Pledge celebration. This year we've had some really fun ones. We celebrated with Chris Bianco and Pizzeria Bianco saying pizza doesn't discriminate, neither should Arizona. Our good friends over at Four Peaks Brewery. And that tagline was, as you can imagine, beer doesn't discriminate, and neither should Arizona. So we've had some really fun opportunities and celebrations around diversity, inclusion, and equality, and treating all people fairly.
Well, I can tell you that this radio station and our parent organization, the Arizona Community Media Foundation, took us all of maybe 30 seconds of discussion around our board table to say, yeah, why not? Of course, it makes all the sense in the world. So we were thrilled to do that. It did take only a minute. I did it, and it only took a minute. Plus, we had an opportunity. I think you gave us an opportunity to have a page that we filled out with information about ourselves, and we were very proud to be able to tell our story and link that with one community and the Unity Pledge. So this is not just for businesses. Individuals can also take the Unity Pledge or sign the Unity Pledge, as it were.
Absolutely. We have one for businesses and organizations and one for individuals that live in the state of Arizona. And for us, we see it as the wade in, right? So signing the pledge could be your first step. And then the question is, are there other opportunities to engage you as an individual, as a volunteer or a spokesperson, or organizationally too? We know that having business spokespeople that are trained on having the conversation about on why we should treat all people fairly is one of the smartest things that we can do to move this important conversation forward. So it's the way in. It's certainly by no means the last step. We see it as the first step.
How does one community finance itself, finance your activities?
Sure. So, great question, by the way. We're a hybrid organization. We come out of the box in December of 2008 as a small business with a big heart, right? One Community Media. And that's where our membership is based, our promotions, and so many of our events are based. And then in 2012, we go to launch our One Community Foundation. And so all of our educational work is launched or housed, if you will, over at the One Community Foundation. And we house that work, that educational work, under the Arizona Community Foundation umbrella. ACF launched an LGBTQ philanthropy wing a few years back. And so they are working diligently to give donors the opportunity to invest in causes such as non-discrimination and other important issues that matter to the LGBTQ community under one roof. They're doing some really great work there.
Well, if anybody has a question about efficacy of your organization, all they need to know is that you are strategically aligned in the way you just described it with the Arizona Community Foundation, because
Sure.
when create that relationship with an organization like yours, it really is the good housekeeping seal of approval. And having, during my working years, having been the president of a community foundation, I can tell you that ACF is a platinum organization. So when they decide to welcome you into their family, it speaks volumes about the great work that you're doing and the efficacy, as I said before.
Well, I thank you, and I agree, but I really have to say hats off to ACF and this LGBTQ philanthropy wing. Sheila Clefcorn, who has been an LGBTQ mentor and leader, for the last 2 decades here in the state and nationally, chairs the philanthropy wing. And I think that there's great conversations that are happening. There's opportunities to educate, again, businesses and organizations and donors that care about treating LGBTQ people fairly and other issues that impact the health and well-being of our community. So it's a great opportunity, and we're proud to be over there.
I assume that there's opportunities for people to step up and volunteer with your organization, and if so, what are those opportunities for people to help, and how do they connect with you?
Yeah, sure. So when you go to openaz.com and you take that pledge, right there it says, there's a button you can click that says, I want to volunteer. And
what are you getting yourself into?
Yeah, well, so, that really depends on the person, right? There's a multitude of opportunities. This year we led Faith and Transgender Education Day at the Capitol, where we trained 25 faith leaders and 25 transgender Arizonans on how to tell their stories and paired them together and had this beautiful day at the Capitol. We'll be doing another Education Day at the Capitol. We have numerous opportunities and events that come up, and then we have our supers, like our star volunteers. Those are our Unity agents, so you can sign up to be a Unity agent and take it upon yourself to help carry this message of diversity, inclusion, and equality for all Arizonans with you, and have that important conversation with your friends and your family and your neighbors too. So.
I know from looking at your website that there's a section there that talks about the fact that you are attempting to collect stories from LGBT Arizonans who have experienced discrimination at work for being LGBT, or who have been denied housing because of their sexual orientation or gender identity, or who have been refused service in a restaurant or other public accommodations because of who they are. Stories of discrimination, while they're difficult to hear, really help us better understand how the lack of legal protections impacts LGBT people every day. So with our remaining time, I wonder if you could share a story or an anecdote that would help put a face on your mission.
Certainly. I think one of the most well-known stories is the Fifth and Wine story. So there were 2 employees. Fifth and Wine was a wine bar located in Scottsdale, and I believe this alleged incident happened 4 years ago, where there were 2 employees, one who was gay, one who was perceived to be gay, and they were taunted and bullied at work. As the story goes, when they complained, I believe one of the employees was fired and the other one quit because it just was not healthy working conditions. Because the city of Scottsdale or the state of Arizona doesn't have LGBT inclusive policies in place, their way of having recourse to this discrimination was to file an EEOC complaint. And so the EEOC came out with their case in the beginning of this year. You can certainly Google it and see the gentleman's just really heartbreaking story. And I think everyone's a victim here. The two gentlemen were victimized, and they didn't have local recourse. They couldn't go to the city where they were employed in or the state to try and get some counseling or help. I think that the restaurant is a victim too, because they didn't have the opportunity to get the type of proper training to understand that how they needed to be and treat all of their employees fairly, and to get proper training so that they stop discriminating in employment. The state and city get a black eye because this is an EEOC complaint. So as we continue to try and walk beyond some of the issues of discrimination that we've had, this is another reminder that while we've come very far, we are not where we need to be in the state of Arizona. And then, at the end of the day, this is 4 years into this complaint. Fifth and Wine closed its doors, I think, within about 90 days of this complaint becoming public. So everyone's a victim in this story.
Nobody wins.
Nobody wins.
Nobody wins.
Discrimination, nobody wins when you discriminate. And I think that there were, if we had proper policies in place, there could have been a collective action that was taken, and there could have been a better outcome. It's a sad story.
It is a sad story, but I thank for sharing it, because it, as I said before, it's important for us to have an understanding in sort of real time about what this all means. Angela, thanks for sharing the work of One Community tonight, and thank you for all you do to help ensure that Arizona works toward becoming a fully inclusive state, with the last barrier to equality being removed for our citizens because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. I thank you for being here tonight. Thanks for being on the Phoenix File.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, that's our show for this week. Thanks again to my guest tonight, Angela Hughey of One Community. Please join me next Tuesday night at 6:30 when my guests will be Jay Gladney and Andy Baran of SCORE, Counselors to America's Small Business. Until then, thanks for listening to the Phoenix File. For Radio Phoenix, this is Stu Turgel.